Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Today I'm getting ready for a show this weekend, and so I thought I'd make some more earrings. Not only is it a relatively simple project, but earrings are great sellers at shows, so I thought I'd make a pair of Larimar earrings. So let's get started. This is one of my design idea sketchbooks you can get on my merch store. This particular one has some useful information about the flow temperatures of different types of solder. Many of the other ones have conversion charts, or there's one that has the Mohs scale of hardness that we just put up. Just some useful metalsmithing information to have handy. But what I really like about these is the dot matrix on the pages, because it helps me to draw better pictures, since drawing pictures is not my strongest suit. But I also like the fact that I have a record permanently of what I made, which is not something I did before I started the YouTube channel, honestly. So now I can look back over the past 4.5 years and see pretty much everything I made. So if I need to reference or figure out how I did it to make something similar. So it saves reinventing the wheel all the time. And you can get yourself one or two of these, and I think you'll like them. So here's what I have in mind. This is not a very good drawing. It's not even symmetrical because I'm kind of in time crunch today. But I just wanted something kind of like that sort of mirrored the shape of the stone. I'm going to put the teardrops downwards. A lot of times, in my opinion, they're overused right side up like actual teardrops. I like to swap it up and point them downward sometimes. It looks more like a sugar beet or something then. So we're going to make a bezel for it out of 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip, which is 4.76 millimeters tall. It's 26 gauge, which is 0.41 millimeters thick. So I didn't honestly measure these stones. They're probably about 8 by 10s or maybe 9 by 11s. But you could use any size you wanted for this kind of a thing. This is going to be 14 gauge square wire. I think I'm just going to use 14 gauge square wire there as well, and then maybe some 20 gauge round for the jump ring and the ear wire. This will just be a little scrap silver melted into a ball, and 26 gauge sheet for the back. That's 0.41 as well. 14 gauge is 1.6 millimeters, 20 gauge is 0.8 millimeters. I think that's everything. So let's start by making a bezel. Here's these two stones here. Oops. They don't match exactly shape and size wise, but they're pretty close. Good enough for a pair of earrings that are on either side of your head, right? So we'll make a bezel for this one here. I already made one for the other one just to save a little bit of time. Here's my bezel strip. So let's, if you're new to my channel, here's some information about my solder and flux and torch and everything like that. I'll file the end of this flat. If you enjoy the video, maybe you should consider subscribing to my channel. Alright, one thing to avoid on doing bezels for teardrop shaped stones is you don't want to put where the two parts of the bezel come together, the two ends, right on the point, because, for instance, this point is pretty rounded, and so it's going to be super hard to set the stone with that if you have a solder joint right there, because it's much stiffer, and it's not going to match the shape of the stone well. So I'm going to make a kind of a rounded kind of a bend like that. We'll see if we can't position that on the tip of that stone and go from there. Okay, we're just going to try and get it as snug around there as we can. And then just about the thickness of this pin, beyond where they meet, I'm going to make a scratch. So here's where they meet. We'll go just a little further along. And that'll give us a little room to file the bezel so it maintains about the right size. You can use a miter vise jig if you have one of those and you're new, or if you just like using them. I think they're a super useful tool. I use mine pretty frequently. Sometimes I use it in non-canon ways, by like using it just to hold something that's small and hard to hold on to, and not actually even use the miterish part of it. If you're new to this, we're going to flux it and then add a little bit of solder right on top of there, and then we'll heat it up hopefully evenly so that that solder just puddles right on top and connects the two together. The thing is, we have to get it up to about 1450 degrees, which is what the temperature, that's Fahrenheit, the temperature that hard silver sheet solder flows at. So let's get it fluxed. And one of the other things I need to mention once in a while in my videos that I sometimes forget to do is it's important you don't melt the solder with the flame of the torch so much as with the temperature of the metal you're trying to connect together. So we're trying to connect these two basically ends of the same piece together, but for all practical purposes it's two separate pieces, because silver loses heat and gains heat really fast. So while I'm heating this side over here, this side's cooling off. So you got to keep the heat moving all the time, and you want both sides of that gap to reach the 1450 degrees at about the same time. And so I'm going to kind of pretty rapidly do that. See, and I did not do a good job. Once again, that's 2 videos in a row where I did a bad job. So I really want it to puddle right over the top of that there, like that one. So you can correct it just by adding another little piece. Getting bad at demonstrating things here, I think. Okay, so let's reshape this into kind of the shape of the stone again. Being aware that the solder joint is going to be a little bit stiffer than the rest of it, so it's going to be a little bit harder to shape it there. We're in the midst of an atypical rainstorm today. I live in a relatively arid place, so it's unusual to have a rainstorm. Although this year we've had a really dry summer, so. Okay. I think we did okay on the size. The shape is okay. Alright, let's make sure that slides in there okay. And then we need to solder it to a 26 gauge piece of sheet. So let's cut a little piece of sheet to do that. I think once you kind of get a feel for heating the metal in ways where the pieces you're trying to solder together reach the temperature that they need to reach at about the same time, then you've kind of gotten the hang of things. Which, based on today's performance, Chad doesn't have the hang of things. Okay. I'm just going to kind of flatten this piece out. I left a little extra on the edges. That's actually by design, because it's much easier to get the heat pumped into that sheet on the bottom if you have a little sheet sticking out outside of the bezel and you don't try to cut it as close as you can or anything. So that'll make it a little bit easier for both of these to reach that temperature at the same time, like I was talking about. Gives you somewhere to focus that heat. We're going to dry this till it's crusty and white. And then we're going to keep heating it a little bit because it gets all bubbly. And we want that to flatten out a little bit before we put our solder in there. Some people put their solder in first and then flux it. I don't love doing that because when the flux starts to dry, it boils and your solder pieces move around. And so if you had them all nice and positioned where you wanted them, and then you do that, then all of a sudden they're not where they need to be. So on this one, we want them to be touching the bottom and the side. You know, if we have a good seam all the way around, it should just flow that entire length as long as we have enough solder in there. But we're going to focus right at the base where the two come together. You'll see the seam form around the outside there. Once it does, you want to go around an extra time or so to make sure the heat pulls that solder, that liquid solder, all the way around. You have a nice clean seam. Then we can just trim this off. Now I'm just going to file it flush on the bottom. It's kind of important when you're doing this that it's okay to file into the base a little bit so it kind of smooths in and has no seam. But you don't want to hit the top of the bezel. Bezel generally is relatively thin as it is. And so you don't want to thin out the top edge any more than it already is, because then it becomes sort of fragile. If you need to, when you're filing, you can secure this against something. Or again, you could pinch it in a miter vise jig or something so you can hold on to it a little easier and then file it more, you know, a little less hand strength required. Okay, so we got our bezel now. Let's take a look at our picture. So we need a little piece of square wire going up with a 20 gauge round ring at the top. And we need, I think let's put the ring on last. I was debating whether to put the square wire, cut it and just solder to either side, or whether I should run it behind it, or what. And I think I'm going to solder it to the side. So I think we'll make these shapes, get them how we want them to look, and then we'll solder a piece vertically on this. Maybe we'll do that first. And then we'll cut out a piece with the saw or something like that after we have this all soldered together. And then add a ring on the top. I think that's the order of operations for us on this one, I guess. So this piece doesn't need to be more than about, the most that's a centimeter, I would guess. Maybe 3/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to cut a couple off here that are a little bit bigger than that. Okay, just want those just kind of flat enough to solder up against this. I'm going to set this one over here for the other earring, because I'm going to make one earring on camera and then I'll make the other earring off camera just for time's sake, I think. Again, this is one of those situations if you want to really guarantee you have a nice flat end, just stick it in that miter vise jig. I wish someone had told me about those years ago. I actually only found out about those after I started the YouTube channel. Although doing it freehand for so long kind of got me to where I could file a pretty straight edge when I want to. Okay, I'm going to do something called pick soldering, where I pick up a little bit of solder on the end of this titanium soldering pick. We'll heat both pieces up to the temperature they need to be for solder to stick to them. And then if I time it right, you just touch it right to that spot and it should jump right in there. So, now again, my timing tonight hasn't been all that great. So. There's more mass in the bezel here than there is in this stem, I think, at a guess. So most of the heat needs to go on the bezel before you start heating that little piece of wire. But I got it pretty close that time and it jumped right in there. So that's kind of what you want it to have happen. Pick soldering is one of those skills that really kind of moves you up a level. So if you're interested, I have a good video about it up there. Oh, I got fuzzy hair from the rain. Okay, that looks pretty good. I took the square wire and I kind of eyeballed about how long I need to get this. So I think I estimated pretty good, but I guess we'll find out. I tried to estimate slightly bigger than I needed. You could also take a skinnier piece of wire and just run it around there and then straighten it back out and measure it. And that would give you kind of a baseline to work from. But let's find the center of these and we'll kind of bend them maybe around a ring mandrel or something, or maybe a dapping punch shaft or something like that that has about the right size. Or we can even use a round nose, well, not a round nose, but a bail making pliers. So we could use something like this if we wanted to, probably. That's big enough, I think. Maybe we'll do that. But let's find the center first. So if you notice, on this I've got the ends of these tapered. I kind of like to do that, but I want to get it close to how big it needs to be to go around here. So, is this big enough? Well, yeah, I don't think that's going to be quite big enough. Well, let's try it. What's the worst thing that could happen? So I'm just going to line that up on the biggest cylinder there and try and bend this evenly. Now, square wire is going to try and torque on you because of its nature. I think we need to go a little wider than that. Let's get a dapping punch. This one's about the same size, I think, yeah. So that's too small. What about the middle one? Let's try the middle one and see how that looks. I can get on board with that one, I think. So let's bend them in a little bit further. So we'll use this one here and set these off to the side for now. Okay. First of all, let's deal with that twist that it tries to do by straightening it out a little bit. I think I need to cut them off a little shorter. Let's see if I can get these ends to come together a little better. So I'm going to cut them off a little bit further down from the center of that curve, I think. That's not too bad. I kind of like that. I'm going to open them up a little bit like this, and I'm going to file them into a taper. That's kind of how I have them drawn, like that. So what if we did that? Soldered a little ball in the middle there. That would look nice. And then we can figure out where to cut that and just cut it and then slide it down there and solder it on. So let's make a couple little balls on some charcoal block. I don't really have particular opinion about how big these should be, so it doesn't tell me if I pick right for a nice balanced piece. Let's see how big those come out. Making balls is usually more successful on a charcoal block than most other surfaces. Something about the way the heat reflects off of the charcoal block makes more symmetrical balls. And they usually have a nice, even, flat bottom, unless you carve a little divot into the base to get a rounder bottom. Yeah, I like that better. I'll have to clean that up a little bit. I kind of left some tool marks in there. Generally, it's easier to clean up before you do what I'm doing here, so I'm not sure why I'm doing this. Okay, I'm going to pick these in here again. Again, the disparity in mass between these two pieces is significant, so most of the heat needs to go on the bigger piece. Little piece, the ball in this case, has so much less mass that it takes just a little time comparatively to get that up to the side temperature. So what happens if you don't get one side up to the correct temperature is you get what's called a cold solder joint. And it looks like the solder flowed and adhered to the side that, on both sides. But if one side didn't quite get up to that temperature, it can look like it actually soldered, but any kind of pressure on the solder joint will just make it pop open because it didn't truly adhere to it. So I'm going to find a T-pin. And let's see if I can get this to look pretty straight up and down. I'm going to do it on some paper also so that I don't have these distracting burn marks from previous mistakes. So I think we can just take the jeweler's saw and cut right through there in both spots. So let's do that real quick. I didn't even intend this, but these look like little blossoms, kind of. That was just a, what Bob Ross used to say, happy accident. Okay, so again, I can just pick a little solder there and solder those closed. Okay, I think it should have just a little stem. I don't think it needs to be that long. Let's cut that off. That right there. Maybe a little lower. File that flat. I need to make little 20 gauge jump rings, and I had a little bit of 20 gauge over here somewhere. Those are a little bigger than I normally would use, but that's okay. I only made 2, so I probably should have made a 3rd one from past experience. Oops, I guess I didn't flux that one, did I? Okay, so let's put this guy up here. Just kind of position him so that solder joint is right up against that square wire. And this is one of those situations, again, where you have a huge disparity in mass. This piece down here is a great big piece. The piece up here is just a little tiny piece. So it takes a lot longer to get the big piece up to temperature than it does the little piece. You know, and once you get them both up to that temperature, then you'll see them really kind of pull together. All right. So I'll show you how to make an ear wire at the end, but right now I'm going to make the second earring, and then I'll be back. So I got a little bit of this 20 gauge round wire left over, so I'm going to cut a couple pieces to make ear wires. Take my round nose pliers, go about, I don't know, 3/4 of an inch in, or maybe 2 centimeters, and make kind of an overlapping loop like that. And I spread this open sideways. I always put it on backside first. Then we're going to take this little spot right at the middle, bend it upwards. I'm going to clamp it so that neither the earring nor the wire itself can move much. Then I'm going to wrap this twice around the base. I have a really old video, if you're interested, about making ear wires. It's quite, several different kinds shown in that video. Okay, so I'm going to go polish those, then we'll set the stone at least on one of them, and I'll get some pictures. I thought on this one I would show you the basics. I do this a little different than other people sometimes. I use this side of my chain nose pliers as a bezel pusher. So we'll start with that by applying some pressure while we're pushing down on the stone. Kind of roll it around there. If you need to secure it in something, that is okay too. Okay. Last step, I'm going to use the rounded outer edge of this and burnish the top edge of the bezel. That just means to rub it kind of hard. I'm trying to kind of smooth out that where it contacts with the stone. I think those are kind of pretty. So I'm going to go ahead and make the ear wires on these, and I'll show you how I do it. I usually start off by making sure the wire is relatively straight up and down. I'm going to bend it forward just a little bit. And then I usually find a round pencil or a pen, a little colored pencil. I put that right up next to that knot there. I'm going to wrap this around that. And I usually, when I'm doing this, I kind of push with my finger up above there to kind of dimple it in like that. And that makes a pretty decent ear wire. I'll make this other one. Usually cut them off just a little bit below the hoop. Tweak the end a little bit like that. The last thing I'll do, if I feel like I need to, I'll clean up the top of the bezel with fine silicone polishing wheel, and I'll use a little cut burr with my rotary tool to kind of smooth those out. So, but that's kind of what I was looking for. What do you think? Tell me if you like them in the comment section, or if you don't like them. I'm not sure yet. I think I kind of like them. They look like hot air balloons a little bit. You turn them the other way, they look like little kind of tulip blossoms or lotus blossoms or something. So I think they're kind of attractive. You tell me though. Okay, well that was some little teardrop Larimar earrings. I hope you enjoyed that and found it useful or informative. If you did, I'd love it if you'd hit the like button before you go. That really helps to get my channel promoted, and I appreciate that a lot. Feel free also to leave a comment, and if you can't hype the video, that's a new feature that YouTube has. Also visit my main channel page and check out some of my other videos. I have 660 plus. I do 3 per week, and I've been doing it for about 4.5 years now, so there's quite a bit of content there. I try to do a mixture of different levels of projects. Like today's was kind of a simple one. Sometimes I do something a little bit more complicated if you're a little bit more advanced. And so there's a variety of stuff there, so I think you'll find it's useful. If you do, make sure to hit the subscribe button. That makes it much easier to find my content, and then you can peruse it at your leisure. So I wanted to thank a couple of groups of people. My patrons over on Patreon are my core group of supporters. Without their support, I probably could not do this, and they have not only helped me out financially, they have created a really lovely environment over there with a lot of cool people who are all interested in metalsmithing and learning how to do different things. So thanks for making it that way. You guys are awesome. My other group is my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 29,300, which is amazing. Thank you for that. The comments section in my YouTube channel is amazing. People provide me with information that I need to know sometimes. I've learned a lot from various people on that, and I do appreciate you sharing your knowledge with me as well, so thanks for that. Thank you also for the Buy Me a Coffees, the Super Thanks, the merch purchases, my ebook purchases. All of that stuff makes my channel sustainable, and I really appreciate it. The video description down below has some important information. There's a link to my Patreon if you want to check out that community and find out about that. There's a link to my merch store if you want to get yourself one of those nice design idea sketchbooks or some other merch. There's all sorts of cool stuff over there. And there's a link to my newest ebook, which is a guide to 2025's tutorials. I did over 170 last year, so there's a page for each of those in the ebook, and with a link to the video, plus additional information about the project itself, including pictures and materials lists, stone information, difficulty rating, and I took some notes about things that I might have learned from the project, or things I might do differently if I was to approach it, or whether I like the outcome or not. So it's a really nice way to have tons of projects right at your fingertips, and a super nice way to support my channel, so get yourself one. There's actually 3 different years I've done it, and you can get all 3 as a package deal if you're interested. So check that out on the merch store. There's a link to get all 3 for $15 off. So, all right, well, thanks for watching today. Take care. Happy silversmithing.